All right. I don't know how much people even care about this. But if you do, you do. You don't, you don't. Okay. Uh, Bicycles are pretty darn efficient and lightweight, right? But they're really, really expensive if you want them to work well and all that. And that's the reason why I'm thinking about this. But also the reason why is because there just isn't as much demand in a lot of places. Which means they don't move a lot, and so they have to sell it for something that makes sense for them to be able to actually kind of return their investment. I'm currently drinking coffee, so this is a morning coffee thing, but it's decaf coffee, so that's what that is. Now, I was thinking about a vacuum design. All right, so a high pressure fluid, it's kind of like a spring, right? As long as it can be compressed. Unless it's Newtonian fluid, in which case Newtonian fluids are, I mean, non-Newtonian fluids and non-Newtonian fluids are weird because like they can technically be compressed, but most often people just condense them. And put it in perspective, look at ice. Ice under pressure then does create different forms of ice, right? And so there are ways to compress these things. Just the typical layman's way of thinking about it is it's a non-compressible fluid because of the amount of effort it takes to compress it. So, anyways, I needed a vacuum line to go to the rear and front, tires. It's supposed to be for bicycles. It's like how much less, right, can you get than nothing? Not much. You know what I mean? Right? Yeah. So it's like that'll probably be the least amount of friction and weight that you can get, which means way higher efficiency. So long as the transfer of that information is quite quick, and because there's nothing there for it to transfer as a medium through, it transfers pretty quickly, right? Now, what that means, however, is that there's a pressure that's on their side where the cranks are and where the axles for the tires are, right? There has to be a given push and pull, that there has to be a pressure there to receive and reactively do something. This is stored energy, okay, as a spring, right? And so when you enact something onto it, meaning a force, it then will react accordingly, right? That means there's pressure behind it, and there's pressure where you are for the crank, and there's all that. So, but that also means the bike frame is a multi-tubular frame. There's an inner core that is the vacuum lines, and then there is, of course, the need for, all right, well, I need gears. Gears are, everything needs gears, right? It's like, how do gears work? And I mean, all gears work off of a lever. You know what I mean? Like a further point from a center. That's all that is. All levers are just gears, and all gears are just levers. They're just, more spokes effectively. But then you can get away with like distance from a center point of an axle. That's a cylinder. So like this center point of the cylinder is right here, and then all the way over here it wants to tilt, right? But it's like if you put gears there that are properly done as it works its way outwards from that center point, it will start to have to twist, and it creates a type of twisting motion that gives you more torque, right? Now that's how we used for the gull wing doors twisted steel springs, right? It's like there are a lot of different ways to effectively make more leverage, okay? Um, which essentially means leverage is pressure. That's right, pressure differences. If there's a vacuum here and there's a big pressurized vessel here, how much I want of that pressure, which is a flow control, sort of like how they do with scuba tanks. They have flow control and pressure control, so flow rate and pressure. So if there is a very highly pressurized vessel, and then there is a non-Newtonian, quotation marks, fluid, it then means it can enact itself and impart a given stored force onto the vacuum line. Now, it takes more and more energy cranking to effectively do that. Okay? Now, the reason why I say that is because, of course, you're adding in more and more force to the pressure vessel because it's shrinking. The pressurized vessel is shrinking. The result of force imparted onto the non-Newtonian then goes up. And same thing to the vacuum line, and resultively to the torque that you see onto the axles. Now, the axles themselves are an entirely different thing in its own right. So I like to go from outside in back to outside. Think of a type of infinity symbol, right? So it's like it's in sideways 8, right? But it's like that's a twisting motion, right? And that's a separate tube to another tube on the inside that then enacts its force onto it. Okay, so these will twist. This is separate. That will then give it a loaded force, which will then have a vacuum where it can go to, which will then allow for it to go off to, of course, the outsides as well. But that's okay. You have to hold your horses. It's like then you have to bolt it. You have to do a whole bunch of shit, right? You have to put it onto the fork and all the things that they're on. So the way that this has to work is very separate to and counterintuitive, it feels, to the vast majority of what people would likely ever do. The solid axle is just a solid axle, right? And spring tension is nice, but bending parts and a flexing material and all that when it's running around and doing things, not the best. It tends to remove tolerance and break things faster. Okay, so we don't want that. Instead, we have to use the fluids themselves as the twisting force. They will independently start spinning anyways. A good way to put that is take your tube, all right, and then it has to be like spokes effectively added to the center axle, right? Now, the center axle has to be vacuumed for this to work. But as that rotates, that's fine, okay, because that's, of course, a bearing. It has bearings, it's able to be sealed, all of that. The outside spokes, they're not going to be twisting. Instead, pressure differences enacted on it then create a given type of pressure for it to rotate. Okay, but that's also, it's not done. So remember those spokes? Those go all the way to the rim. That's where you input all of that vacuum and pressure line. Because there's another tube inside of those spokes that's a vacuum. These tires are entirely different tires. I know. Where is this going? Holy fuck, what? Uh, I was on board. This seems insane, right? It's like, yeah, no, because the tires are actually held up by suspension, like, you know, uh, cloth or synthetic fiber spokes. There's multiple points of contact on the tires that then draw them in to where the spokes are for the vacuum line. And that's where the little valve thing is. And by valve, it's really just a diaphragm, and then there's a seal that's there. So that way it's as light as possible, as there is no air in the vacuum. Instead, it is, I mean, the tire, the inside of the tire, it is held up by a supportive structure that's then just rubberized, with a compound. So it's able to hold a lot of pressure, but it also means that pressure in the sense of the tension on the lines. Okay. But also it has a secondary skin that's on the outside. Okay. And what that means is it's like that is a big, thick carcass of rubber, right? With multiple little intersecting springy parts, which that's actually pretty easy to do because it's just a mold of rubber and then you just stick this onto it and it works. Out to they congeal, they weld, whatever they want to call a fuse, sure, whatever. Vulcanization, sure, okay, it did that. Yeah, whatever version, right? But it's super cheap to do that because like we can pretty much make those molds pretty cheaply and make that happen. It's kind of like a tread, right? So, but that also means you don't have to worry about flats ever again, unless like we're talking a real deep kind of puncture, which would I think would you run over like a railroad spike or something? There's just needles sticking up off the ground, just like big fat needles. Like you could tear this thing apart and you still get it to work. Anyways, I'm gonna move on. Um, so that tension line goes to the spoke side. Like there's an obvious pressure inside of the rim itself, but of course there's the vacuum line on the inside, right? And it's like what that means is like that because they have to be connected, of course, and for the spokes. Um, it's a good way to put this, right? Are under tension in the sense that we need them to rotate, right? Right. And so they aren't just light, they need to be able to transfer fluid from an outside and a higher point down. And so when I said that I was making that pressure difference change, I'm opening up effectively a type of valve, pressure of the spokes. And then as it rotates to where the vacuum is, of course, there's now an opening, because that opens effectively kind of like a valve, to where the spokes are. And so then it will change a given type of pressure difference, right? And so conservation momentum in mass says it wants to now move and continue doing that. Of course, it takes effort to do this, and you don't want tremendous amounts because that's a lot of effort. And so, like, this is valving changes, gearing changes, the amount of pressure differences that you will see because that's kind of like a Stirling engine, right? And as it goes from a higher point back towards, it enacts a given type of torque force, a pressure change force. That's a big lever onto those spokes to the main axle, right? And so that main axle then has a bearing that's, well, it is a bearing effectively, right? But it's also got to have points of contact in between each other to allow for it to rotate more freely instead of it's just pressure goes in and then it goes off to another one. It's instead it goes in and then it rotates and wants to go off towards the direction of travel, right? That you're looking for. So that enables you to get a big lever, further and further away. But then it can get closer and closer and closer, and it takes less and less time for it to travel. But of course, it takes more and more force to get the same equivalent amount of force enacted on it, because of course while a lever, it still takes time to travel. And so it takes longer for you to actually get it to move, thus making it like it's a big, ginormous gear that's very easy to turn, and then it's way less of a gear, but now it can turn faster because it takes less time to move the fluid around, but you need more force, which is the equivalent of gearing changes from a larger gear to a smaller gear. Now, how this has to intersect is a bit different because, of course, we have multiple spokes throughout from the outside towards the center. And of course, it has to allow for those little lines to intersect between each of the spokes. Right. So, a good way to vision, I guess, that or imagine whatever, right? It's like those spokes are not quite, and the valves are not quite the things that you think they are. right? It's, well, there's in its view, right? This is relative perspective to the outside, the equivalent of not just that leverage, but at the wingtip of a blade, a fan blade, there's a pressure difference that now means it wants to head that direction, right? And that's essentially what we're doing. We're creating a rotating Stirling engine that has to push its pressure onto the bearing axle. That's there. Now, that's a little bit complicated to imagine at first. So think of it like as it's, going from this pressurized state, it's going to try and head towards a moment of where the spokes, but also instead where the tips of the blades are. So it'll head towards the spokes, right? And then, of course, you want that to move things, right? But it's also moving the equivalent of a spoke inside of that tube, right? And so it's moving from, let's say it was all the way at the 3 o'clock position towards where the rider is. It will then move towards the 9 o'clock position, and it transfers energy into the other spokes, right? And it gets closer and closer and closer, and it rotates as it does this, right? Kind of like a turbine torque converter, so to speak, right? So uh, that's effectively what that is, and same thing for your cranks. See, your cranks are effectively another version of that. They slide, the where the position of the pedal is will slide, but it's kind of facetious to say because like they're in a type of pattern that's a lot easier for you to pedal from a higher point down to a lower point, and so you get more of that available energy, right? But it's more of a 11 to like a 7 o'clock instead of 12 to 6, right? And that helps you in terms of torque, but it also positions it so that way your feet are very much able to maintain those positions easier. And it's really just, technically speaking, a lever that's rotating, kind of like an elbow pin with a wrist pin that isn't really a wrist pin. It's a sliding part that'll move like that. And that gives you this type of effect that you're looking for your crank. It's still a crank arm, it'll still move, right? But of course, that's tension and pressure that's onto your, um, you know, fluid that's in there to the vacuum line that's inside of the bike's uh, frame. And then, of course, you can run regular hydraulic, but I run vacuum stuff to the brakes that are disc brakes on the sides. It's probably the least amount of offset torque applied that you can create because it's coming from both sides towards the center, right? And then it's using the very rim itself to move the vehicle, the bike, that is, right? And it's the least amount of weight that you could probably have for something like this because, of course, it's a vacuum and you only need pressurized air. In this case, it's a type of air. It's very unreactive, so that way you don't have to worry about that. Possibly getting so compressed and so hot during this that it creates an issue. Same thing for the fluid. The fluid's a very small area, and so reality-wise, it's just imparting kind of like the string sort of, old cranks, except they're not that old. Um, then applies it to the springs of the diameter of their type of setup. So they had these springs on either side, and then they would apply torque, and then they would wrap back up. That's what that was, right? And so if you know anything about that, then it's like, well, yeah, I'll just put it into a rim, and it works really rather well. And instead of needing like this idea of this pressure, having issues and being reactive, and even having very low amounts of actual, efficiency. It's like got the opposite of that because, of course, the fluid itself is a heat soak. and that pressure gets directly translated, from that crank all the way through, right? So in order to maintain for of course, it has to move, right? Like that's moving ahead of time, and as the thing changes, okay, the spokes, that is, as it rotates, it, of course, needs to maintain a given type of balance, but not just a balance, it needs to help impart force. So, like, yes, I have force there. It's a spring, sure. And yes, sure, I move this, but this is actually a pump. That's what that would be doing. It's a acoustic resonance pump Stirling engine. It's going to rotate and it has a degree of exchange of that heat. That heat's good because that makes the Stirling engine more efficient. Same thing for your cranks. As it exchanges it into, of course, the force. That's a acoustic Stirling engine that cools rather than heats. It's going to cool it, as of course the gas expands. The force of your non-Newtonian fluid gets increased, along with the pressure in the spokes. So it's the very opposite of less efficient. It gets more efficient. Anyone that might have said that it was less efficient is really just an idiot that should shut up. They don't know anything about physics, is effectively the problem. Now, there are seals here. Quite a few, right? And it's like, yeah, no, that's gapping and some O-rings that will last for a really long time. And some lubrication. So, if you're gonna, like, change out your tire, I mean, it won't be very hard to do this. It's a little bit of lube and an O-ring. And what do you know? It'll work just fine. Now, granted, this is where you get the pump out, the automatic pump to pressurize, the spokes, the rim, tires, and everything for this. But it's like, well, you can absolutely connect it to the nipple that will take out that air, and then you can store that somewhere else in another vessel. Pretty simple stuff. And then you can reuse it. Which is pretty easy to do because it's not a liquid. Of course, it's a gas. But it's like, look, this is a deflated beach ball. What do you know? Or anything that's like that, basically. So, boring after a while. You know what I mean? It gets real boring to like listen to people like, that won't work and you'll lose this and it'll be way more expensive. And I'm like, what are you fucking on about, you utter idiot? How stupid do you think people are? Apparently very stupid. You think they can't store anything in another tank? You think they can't pressurize it with their own bike pump? Behold, my pressurized storage bike pump thing, and I sell to this fuck it. It's like here, it's got the empty spot of the vacuum for all of your bike tires, and here it's the same. If you pump in regular air, it's got all the things to be able to make it so that way you have the right gas. This is nitrogen. It's gonna be nitrogen, isn't it? It's gonna be nitrogen. I bet you it's nitrogen. I bet you it's night. You know how they get argon and xenon, krypton from our atmosphere? They just filter it from our atmosphere with some filters. There's a certain percentage by volume. That's what they do. It's very unreactive, and so it's not attached to like almost anything. But because it's so heavy, it usually gets trapped into dirt and gets released. as a result of mining operations, or they just filter it from our atmosphere, literally. Now, granted, I didn't say that that's what that was, so there's that. But you can just use nitrogen if you want. That'd be fine. I'm not going to use nitrogen. I want to sell it with a blend of argon and a iodine bismuth carbon gas. Which I know sounds weird, but it's doable. I mean, they have tungsten, hexa, whatever the fuck, fluoride stuff. And I'm like, yeah, no, this is an iodine. Yeah, with a bismuth and carbon. I'm not going to give you the structure or anything or how this works because it's like, I'm never going to do that. This is mine. Nobody makes this. Go fuck yourself. As a result, it turns into, it's one of the heaviest, most impossible to turn into a baryonic fucking compounds that you can make. You can compress it an enormous amount, hundreds of gigapascals, and the damn thing just won't form a fucking liquid. It's the worst for anything other than me because it's a wonderful spring now. It loves the phase change though. If you could ever get into another phase other than gas, except you can at 100 gigapascals for what it is worth. You have to cool the fuck out of it though. You know, it's like I need to get to negative 20 C's, and now it's a liquid. Cool the fuck out of it, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty hard to cool things down that fucking cold. Are you kidding me? It's not easy. Mister over there is so fucking simple. So, anyways, it's still got to hit 100 gigapascals or more to be able to do that. So, good old phase change liquid coolers. We gotta get my 100 gigapascals for this thing. This is my new refrigerant. You know what the best part is? It will literally never go through anything that's even somewhat porous. It's so fucking big and heavy. It just doesn't go through like anything. It's the worst actually, because if you know anything about hydrogen and like helium cooling, right? Like you get down to a liquid, they like to become a superfluid that likes to go through shit. Like they just love to go through like copper lines, brass, fucking lots of shit like that, right? And it sucks. And so it's like this does the opposite. It's like, oh yes, no, it's quite pressurized, sure. But it's like, yeah, and it won't go through anything, like at all. It is the most repulsive fucking damn compound as a gas that you can get. And there's like almost no boundary layer as a result. So it's like, no, it's a refrigerant, right? And it's like, it's really good at transferring heat in the sense that it's really good at just effectively moving pressure around. Like it has, boundary layers. Like that's how you tend to transfer heat, right? It's like it has to smack into something, right? And it's like this goes and says, yeah, I don't really want to. It's like you're under 100 gigapascals. Hit it harder. Uh, 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 you. Meanwhile, instead of the molecule itself or whatever, we get field to field interactions, which are far more efficient, actually, in transferring energy, force energy. Now, not necessarily heat, because it's still going to vibrate a lot. And so it's quite insulative. If you get it hot, it'll vibrate quite hot and, be stable for really, really high pressures, you know what I mean? And heat. But it also means that it's like, yes, it'll remain quite hot. It'll have to dump its energy field to field wise instead of force wise. And so it takes an enormous amount of effort with light coolers and acoustic resonances to cool the fucking thing. And so it's like, oh, it's only negative 20. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's only negative 20, guys. It's not that hard. This fucker does not want to go below like 32, you know, like degrees C. Like the moment you start compressing the fucking thing, it's like, no, no, I don't wanna. And it appears to be how it molecularly lines up to itself and slides against itself and just keeps dumping energy into itself and then wraps itself back into itself. So good way to put it is like it's like a, oh, I have a pivot, and then it goes pivots right back into the center core of the gas. It's really annoying, you know, to cool the fucker. But you can do it. It just takes a lot of effort and time. And that's with my best efforts and time of using light and acoustic resonance. Uh, it just takes a really long time to cool it. Uh, Sucks as a result of that. But it's also really good force transfer gas, right? Really good at transferring force that way. You know what I mean? Like whatever pressure is here, there's a difference of pressure there. It's very heavy. Like it is heavier than metals. Like lithium, fucking some steels. It's heavier than some steels, honestly, at certain pressures. You know what I mean? Like I can have mercury around and I can compete for it as a gas, as a total density and weight at the right pressure. That means it really moves things around quite hard. But you have to have those be diaphragmic and also able to transfer the force to something else. That's kind of what that is. But that's also why I put them under pressure. And that's why, well, yes, they are my gas types. This is an argon and this gas type that allows for you to compress it and put weight and force on it. It's really great, right? But it also means it's under gigapascals of force in certain moments and areas. And then it expands dramatically. And so it's a very hyper efficient Stirling engine, right? Of the fluidic variety. So it accelerates massively and hits the non Newtonian fluid in such a way that it really moves that vacuum pressure over to where the spokes are, right? And so as a result, it does a lot of work very efficiently for almost next to nothing in terms of actual work, which is great. You're going to want that. But other people use nitrogen, so, nitrogen is cool, I guess. It's cool, whatever. It's fine. Some people like that, I guess. A lot easier to get. I'm the only one that sells it. Anyone can get it. There's no special license. Well, sure, I'm the only one that sells it, but it's still real cheap, easy. Anyone can, it's large amounts, volumes, which you don't really need. Like people don't really know this, but it's like, yeah, the amount that's in there is minuscule. We're talking way less than even a fucking 250 milliliter amount does all of this work. But that's because of the pressures that they're under and the vacuum that exists. And so the force, because the mass is relatively high and the density is relatively high, it enacts a large amount of force. And it's done so very efficiently because it's able to cool itself anyways, because of course spokes, air, tire moves. But it's like, no, I kind of want that insulated. That heat gets me more force. So I'm actually making those spokes into a type of, well, they'll take a small amount of air and then they'll widen it and transfer that heat energy from outside into this, into more and more force applied. And so it gets more and more efficient and gets more and more from our atmosphere, right? As it goes, which is good. You're going to want that. Because it means you can pedal during the nighty night code 160 negative degrees C's on the Arctics. circles, in the Antarctics too, and be able to do all of the cool biking adventures. Yes, get your coats out and do your bike adventures out there in the Antarctic, as we all do, obviously, of course. The the funny part for me is like it's not pressurized enough. Like you actually do have to get it to hundreds of gigapascal, right? And really, we're talking at least 100 to 120 to get down to that negative 20 to get it to become a liquid, which even then still makes it really efficient, right, at doing its job. So it's like, hmm, well, it's negative 160 degrees C somehow magically. The Antarctic people getting. Are you insane, you dick? No! I don't know. That's so cold. Anyways, whew, it's quite chilly. It's only slightly above the connection. The air is fucking. It was moving on. Two, alright, that means it's quite insulative, sure, but it's also really unable to turn into a liquid because it's just not enough pressure. And it's really hard to get to gigapascals alone, let alone hundreds. So these are where the diamond anvils came in, and it's like this is the pump effectively. It's like it comes in already pre-chilled and fairly pressurized. You know what I mean? And then it then expands into that, right? And then that'll give me the gigapascals I need. So, and since I don't really need much, and it's only 250 milliliter, really roughly for both spokes and the bracket, the where the crank is, it's like, yeah, it's not that hard to do that. But I've never heard of a diamond anvil being used as a pump. Yeah, well, get used to that, I guess. You squeeze, there's a hole, it goes and stays into line. You squeeze, it goes into a hole, and it does this over and over. And of course, diamond goes spin, and then hole not there, as expand, and then goes open, and then more air, and then squeeze, and then go into hole. It's a nice acoustic resonance as it comes in. If I do it the right way, I get more pressure that comes in and more air, and so then it get there's a real fine resonance frequency there that I get more efficiency for my poem. Anyways, the hole and the tube, that's easy. I can easily just make a fucking diamond, like, couple of them, but I don't need diamond for a sort that fucking point, like, honestly, you know, um, because this is the material I'm working with, so it's like, I don't need that. Um, it won't go through any line, basically. And as a result, it's like, yes, well, it can be rather small. It just needs to handle some gigapascals, right? Of like pressure there, but it's already going somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like it has some other place to go to. So it's like it's actually only going to experience it as like a couple of kilopascals as it's rapidly wanting to go somewhere else. And so then it's like, well, the line doesn't need to be that hard actually. But it's like, yeah, just in case, got some flat plates of steel. I put some diamond around there, and then like it's basically some diamond anvils that are held, you know what I mean, by plates of steel that are clamped pretty hard. And then it goes off into the vessel. It's just like, look at my tiny little vessel, is what you're imagining, right? No, no, no. Look at my tiny little vessel. Boom, boom, boom. The herd. It is big. But it's not as big as these guys. Look at the size of those fuckers. Holy fuck. That's big. Yeah. Look at the nitrogen storage on those guys. I can't match that. This is a low volume. I'm never gonna be able to do that. I mean, this is just a regular big old fucking, I forgot what it was. I think it's like a 5 ton, you know, storage of water liquid vessel. But it's like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. Especially since I have to slowly fill it up, with this little thing. And so it's like, no, 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 I'm not gonna. Are you kidding me? If I have to pay for the fact that, behold, my multitudes of many resonant frequencies going into this, into a big old line, these big chonkers. You think I can only get the one diamond anvil? Bullshit, bitch. Try me. I can get so many of these. Look at this. These are cheap. I can get polycrystalline diamond. I'm gonna go get a bunch of polycrystalline diamond anvils. They're quite a bit harder than you and stronger. Anyways, I'm gonna get a bunch of these. They're huge. They're massive. They got these little plates and shit. This is way easier than you said it was. Anyways, I make this. It goes into a bunch of these. Those are larger to a smaller, 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 and to a final smaller. And then it goes off into the multitudes of lines that go right into the one ginormous thing, which, by the way, that's a vessel size changer effectively. There's a diaphragm there that then, slowly expands. And so it starts off like practically nil in terms of the volume that's there. Is it right? But then it goes and slowly slides down until it's all of it that you can have filled at that pressure, maintained from the start. Because, of course, that'll pressurize the line, kind of a thing, right? But it's like, no, this needs to fill up other things. I'm using this for other stuff. So it'll go up, and it'll go back down, and it'll go up, and it'll go back down, and it'll go up, and it'll go back down, equalizing its pressure constantly. And then it gets pumped into making sure, no matter what, it's at the right pressure, which is in the hundreds of gigapascal. This is about 200 gigapascal. And it's cool. It's quite chilly. There's quite a few vacuum things in there. So that way it's a liquid. I need it as a liquid. Because then it makes it tremendously easier to go just 1 gigapascal, or maybe 2, right? It's much easier to do as it expands, right? I don't even need to worry. But it's like, it's under pressure and it's a liquid. And so that's, storage of energy, that kind of thing. Now, other people, this is a bomb. Yeah, I mean, if you're stupid, I guess it's a bomb. There's quite a few pressure release valves, like for what it's worth, and it's basically in an entombed, reinforced, thick ass concrete with lots of steel slabs and shit. So it's that are hardened, by the way. Not gonna do anything to anyone really. And it's all gonna vent up into the atmosphere, so it'll go upwards because that's where the pressure relief is. And it has a big old hole down below. So if it blows, it'll break that, and then it'll just blow up the top, and everything else will just keep making sure it goes up there. I had to test it. So I built a first one that I tested. A lot of people were not very happy about the amount of loud sound that was created. Well, I captured all that gas as it was coming out, because of course I had a big old bag effectively that's quite good at expanding rapidly. Because of course it's in a vacuum. And it's quite well, I already know what the volume is that's going to be. I already know how fast it's going to accelerate at, and I already know the heats and the potentials and everything. So it's like, well, with this bag and blah, 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 and then so like this is a diffusal kind of bag. This is another bag, to all of a sudden it's now going to expand, and it will then all then be recompressed yet again, but it's also got solar panels, which it lovingly helped, mm, keep up high until eventually, like, we had to take them down because, it wasn't able to float anymore, with the volume size of things. Because it's way denser than our atmosphere, but, like, you know, it's still a very large thing, and so while, yeah, it'll never float, it's still, like, gonna be able to hold up fucking solar panels. But they're floating to their version because there's a gas underneath. That's how that works. So, anyways, um, but then I stored all that back into the thing, and well, the new one, that's that one. It's literally the same thing. Well, not the one that we tested, because of course that's a little damaged. Then we repaired that a little bit, and then we used it again. But the boom of an opening bag was quite loud for a lot of people. The energy was quite intense, I'll say. I had to put like a big bunch of multiple, diffusal net and other bag structures, there. That's basically like a big, diaphragmic, horn, so to speak, as there's air that's getting rushed upwards. So I had to rush in air at the sides and towards the top, back in towards the direction of flow as it was expanding. So it created one hell of a huge pressure wave spike that was then diffused over a larger surface area and then also made to do this cool, big, huge infrasonic style of pump and frequency action. And then it rained very hard somewhere. As like, there's this huge, weird ass, fucking massive cloud that suddenly formed in our really high upper atmosphere here. Like, where did this atmosphere come from? How did this atmosphere get here? Where did this come from? Nobody knew except us that were testing. I was like, hey guys, this probably comes from us. It's probably originating from these guys over here that did this. Anyways, then of course it's too dense and it's going to cool off, right? Because as it expands and there's less density and now it's suddenly more dense, but then of course that heat is IR and all that stuff. Anyways, it effectively made a bunch of the carbon dioxide get into a charged particle in a magnetosphere and a whole less dense thing, and then it had more likelihood with the X-rays and get some gamma rays and some ultraviolets and so on to cleave and break their bonds into forming bunches of graphite and graphene particles that cloud seeded with a bunch of all this, you know, dust and debris that got brought up with it and water as well. And so then it's like, oh, we're condensing back down as we float back down. And then this whole place got loaded with water. It was big boy water. No floods, luckily, which is nice, but still quite a bit of water. A large amount. The crops were good that year, yeah, that's what I got told. They were quite good. They were huge nutrient densities, apparently, and it rained pretty consistently for them, and then it kind of didn't do it again. So they were like asking us if we could test it. I was like, I can't do that because it was really quite expensive. Yeah, so that's what that was. But anyways, I passed my test. I passed the building test. I passed all the codes and whatever. It's quite safe. Um, It is an asphyxiant, so don't breathe it in, because of course you don't have oxygen there and you can't use it. And it's dense as fuck, so it'll remain in your lungs, so don't do that. There's no, uh, what do you call that? Like, drug-esque induced, right? Like state. It's very unreactive, so it's really just displacing oxygen. So that's what that they're getting high off of. That's what that would be. Um, it doesn't cause any cancer, but like I don't want it to, be out and about, so to speak. Just because it'll sink to the lowest spot of wherever the hell that is. So, ozone's fine, Your ozone's all good to go. Your upper hemispheres are fine. Like there's the ionosphere, all of those, they're good. But they will absolutely go into any and all of your dirt and mud and stuff. And so like any basin essentially, if it were to spill from like on top of a mountain, would become flooded with like this and probably kill you because you can't breathe, even though you think you're breathing. So like that's the dangerous part, and so that's why I store them as a liquid like this here, and I only transfer very small amounts to anyone under very specially designed canisters for this. That's all that is. Or as a one complete unit, which might ship to you, like the bike, or a refrigerant, which by the way, it's not really a refrigerant, it's more of an acoustic resonance pump. Um, Stirling engine, kind of AC. It's a Jules Thompson as well. There's a vacuum in there. There's a small acoustic resonance, then like small, medium, large, and then back to small, and then medium, and then large, and it expands it, right? But it's like this is a potentiator, so it's like even though it only has a little bit of force there, it's like yes, but what if I did not that? And I said, go fuck yourself. Actually, there's this here which then expands and increases its force, which increases the amount of energy transferred. All right. I was like, well, that would work. And it's like, hey, thank you. Yeah. It creates a weird insulatory thing to like whatever material it's in. Not like just from electricity, but like field wise, it like drops fields. Like it'll suck fields on one side, and then the other side has fewer fields. So charge differences, or like for the boundary layer effect, we're talking electromagnetic and charge as it runs over, and so it'll bounce into it a lot easier. But the other side, no, I need those fields, apparently is what it says, but it's also, I don't want it to go anywhere near you. Mm. You know what I mean? So perfect material for certain things, but other things, it is the worst, actually. You know? It's like, no, I need that though. That'll help me. That helps me do a lot more. Eh, but anyways, for refrigerant, it works really well. Stirling engines works really well. It works really well for a lot of things, truthfully, except for transferring heat and ever changing its fucking temperature. It's the worst. So it's a little like that. Like vacuums are better still. If like you do a good vacuum, it's still gonna be better. But like this gas is pretty close. It's about a 20-ish at max percent, difference, right? Between a vacuum transfer of energy and with this in it. So not bad, right? The other part was it was supposed to be for my spacecrafts as a thin film of multiple layers of this, and then went charge, and I was already going to have like a need for an atmosphere, like for me to breathe. It then makes it much easier for certain catalytic processes and the ability for us to scrub carbon out and then get it back into my terrarium bioreactors sort of thing, where like it'll take that carbon and then it'll scrub it, and it makes it easier for it to scrub it, right? And also so dense that it's like charged particles, go fuck yourself, bitch. I don't like that. I don't want any of those alpha and betas. Man, get the fuck out of here. You're fucking not good for my health. Shoo, shoo. Uh, that's the whole comparable. Remember, at certain pressures to mercury in terms of density. So it's like this comes in as a liquid, right? And it's not bad, but when it's in space, it's able to heat up, right? And so it's like this is a really good Stirling engine. You know what I mean? Like, this is a really good Stirling engine for us, like enormously good one. It's super dense. It'll be able to expand. It has so much pressure. It has the ability in these thin little films to massively reduce the amount of any radioactivity hitting us. Now, of course, it takes a little bit of electricity running through it, and of course, that increases the likelihood chance of interactivities, otherwise known as the fields man, kind of prevent them from going through, brah. And so then they do that. But like, there's also, yes, so in space, if you can pedal, you will be able to use this to accelerate a captured amount of charged particles because they usually get trapped in this because they're that level of unreactive, right? Like they just won't fucking, they'll just trap them in between several of them unless they really do just hit. They'll just trap them in the fluid and gas. So it's like, well, that's perfect. I need that anyways. That's literally great. Yeah, I can totally use that to just pump them towards where my engine is, and then I can exchange that as a particle I can accelerate now as a ionic and or plasma, meaning positively or negatively charged, and then I can combine them into where the nozzle and then the bell end, which is really kind of a nozzle combustion chamber thing that then goes into the bell end kind of thing, right? And it's like that's great, perfect. I can travel pretty fast, pretty far, and all I have to do is pedal really hard, which isn't really pedal really hard, but you do have to pedal. And the further away you are from like a star, like the less energy there is. But if you're traveling pretty fast, then you have a lot of uh, you know, other particles that are there, and you get friction. So you do actually have the ability to get a lot of energy, and there's blue shifting. And so as a result of blue shifting, you are actually able to get even more energy as a result than you would have thought possibly. And so, yeah, so I do have a decently large solar collector, but it's not necessarily as necessary as you might have expected, right? Which is a whole other thing. It's like if I needed to, at bare minimum, it's a large amount of pressure stored, and I can just dump it into the engine if I really had to. I don't really want to because it's like it's protecting my ass and so on. So like there's that. But if I had to, I could do it. So there's that, right? That's a scary proposition, though. To me, it's not going to be radioactive or anything, which is nice. It's more about the fact that, oh, my protection's kind of gone. I'm going to be wearing my suit inside of my fucking spaceship. I'm so wearing my suit. There is no way I'm not wearing my suit. I'm gonna get some electric coils or any of the magnetic field. You know what I mean? Like I've got several layers still, but just in freaking case, especially if you're traveling anywhere near like even a 60% light speed, is more than enough to make any of that like super deadly and dangerous. So it's just not really usually worth it, right? But people, right? They're different. Do whatever they want to do. My solar cell kind of things aren't really technically solar. They're solar collector cell things, but they're really more just I make magnetic field extend around ship and then make light to do the bendy dance and reflective and so on. And so go away out of here, dangerous stuff. I shall collect only the light I need and all of the particle hydrogens and anything else I might need to burn. You know? Yeah, ram air collectors. Yoo-hoo. And then they're also quite adept at sort of resisting charged particles from coming in because there's that level of dense. So that's what they're for. I was like, I'm going to create my own magnetosphere. I'm going to create my own light sphere, which is really just like optical tweezer, but it's like instead of extending electromagnetic field lines and being ridiculous, it's quite powerful. I can't do that. Instead, it turns into I'm using light to effectively try and interfere and tweeze and carve a path in front and try and like get that to sort of more easily be captured if it's the right stuff, or just get the fuck out of here and new out of here. Shoo, shoo, shoo you. Same thing where like, well, is that in front of us? Can I burn it a little bit and then have it slightly move as a result of some thrust right there? Can I? I'd like to do that. I don't want to have to. You know how fast this is going? This is really hard to move. Can I just move that out of the way just a little? I mean, we have some time here before we're gonna hit it, right? Hmm? Which even then, it's like space is so fucking empty. I really doubt it'd be necessary, but still, just in case, you know. And we glide on through, which isn't really gliding, but I mean, it's kind of like gliding because I mean, we are kind of that, right? We're not really, but we are kind of like that. Yeah, I'm gonna move on. That was the whole premise of that. But here is the thinking about bike cranks, because like this is a hyper efficient bike crank. You know, you think it's not that good, but no, it will absolutely do that and put you all the way to another star, possibly, if we get all of the stuff together correctly. You will bike between our planet and Sirius. One day it would be done. Human power got you there. Now, granted, there's a lot of extra sauce there, sure, but you know, it's what it is. It's still human power. It's been very little, it seems like, right? Hmm, kind of. I mean, it really depends on what we're doing on that point. Yeah, because like all that little power, like it will add up over a period of time, and it's not nothing, right? Like electric motors on a bike doesn't mean you don't pedal and you still put in energy. And we're talking gearing ratios here at that point, right? And so it's like this little tiny lever. It's like yes, no, eh, yeah, no. Well, you're traveling quite fast, and so like every little bit can help on that one. But yeah, you're right. It's other stuff. It's still gonna be there. I'm gonna move on. That is the thinking about bike crank thing today. Um, yeah, I've been thinking about it because it's like, well, you know, bike cranks haven't really changed much. And then I was thinking about it because it was like, well, they argued for like why bikes are supposed to be as expensive as motorcycles. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's because of the amount of people that don't really use them, right? And that's really what that is. They are still, you know, precision and made, and there's quite a few different types. And a bike, a motorcycle is really you just kind of get the one kind of frame or whatever else. So that's what it is. But you know, in terms of value per dollar, a lot of people are going to see a motorcycle as more value. It's just how that works. Um, so that was a whole GCN or something news network, global or GC, Global Cycling News and Network thing. Yeah, but I liked it. But it's like, yeah, it's true, but it's also not that true. You know, right? It's like true, but it's like it's not really taking into account the fact that like that's supply and demand, that's manufacturing, that's all that stuff, you know. So, and it's still it's what it is because it's like, well, you have to value your time and you have to get enough money to be able to do it again, and you have to do all that in terms of how to make it and sell it. So, as for the physics work just fine. You know, it's not a lower pressure, you know, low, able to impart a lot or low amounts of energy, you know, work energy. You do have to do something to make it happen, right? But it is such that like it's not that hard to do it. That's what that would be. You know, the wheel travels slower, but you have more leverage. The wheels travel faster, but you have less leverage. So you have to put more force. That's basically all that is. You know? Same thing for your cranks. Like your cranks are this cool like little thing, but oh right, I didn't talk about this for the crank thing earlier, but like you know you have to lift them up. Yeah, no, this is the opposite of what you think for being clipped in. The same way you have to raise your leg up. There's a weight there. That's right. The opposite of what you think it's going to be, where I can just push down. It's like, no, there's a reason why there's a belt there. There's a reason why there's a lot of stuff like that to a lot of people's dismay, I'm sure. But it's like if you want to lift up your leg, it has to do it not just from the 12 or the 11 to 7, it has to do it to the 5 to 1. You have to move it forward, and then that imparts energy, of course, in instead of, oh no, it'll just happily come up. No. You have to use both the lifting up and the pushing down, the lifting up and the pushing down and the lifting up, both together to be able to fucking, get this. But while you burn twice the amount of energy, you do go exactly 1 times the amount of fast. Sure. And I think that's a good thing, like you need to burn more energy. You do. You just don't even know yet. Because I wasn't talking about it, but like this crank and everything is not just efficient, it'll take in extra energy elsewhere. As the rolling resistance of your tires, of course, builds up heat, it'll impart it into your efforts. Same thing with the air as well. So the more you do this, the more efficient, and to the point where it's like it's not efficiency, it's going past what you ultimately can even produce in terms of the energy you put in. It's going over the point of losses seen, frictional and so on losses, which is good. You're going to want that. And then that's the other part where it's like, hey, you want to cool your body, don't you? No, no, I know what you. Here's a suit. It's going to cool your body down. It's going to take that heat and push it into and exchange it into your bike. You want to be colder, don't you? Burn that energy. Give it to me. Give me more power. No! No, no, no. Summer days are great. You just need to ride your bike. Oh, so it's what is that, like a 45 degrees Celsius? That's not that bad. Just go run your bike a few laps around the old town there. It'll cool you off. The energy has to go to something. Oh yeah, no, it still is going to exchange it. It's just gonna be, um, you know, slower, effectively. Yeah, and it has to do work energy, and so doing that, that's how that really happens. Yeah, but anyways, cools you off, which is good. You're gonna want that, and then, well, here's electricity from your sweat and the air. It's like that's sodium, but also you have that's humid versus not humid. Behold, the suit makes more electricity than you thought, which imparts even more electricity as heat, which is not electricity. So deal with that. Into the power. My body. The suit. Ah! I assume it's quite heavy, isn't it? No, it's quite light. How does it do that? I just told you. So we're gonna move on. It's like, well, no, let's get out the old. Um, the frame is now a bunch of heat exchangers, effectively, and then you have a radiator there. And we're gonna take the air from around us, and we're gonna have the heat exchanger itself, the reservoirs and whatnot, and the material. It's a solid state battery with some capacitors and so on. And so as it would take in energy, it of course has to effectively bend some things and expand some stuff as a Stirling piezoelectric generator that's 90% efficient at producing electricity from the air with a little bit of battery juice and more. There's some, what is this, an electric motor here? Or do I just want to have heat? How much heat can I force into the Stirling engine before it'll fail? A lot. A fucking lot. Like, it would melt tungsten lots. So keep it going. You know, don't even need that electric motor. Suck it the fuck up now. Direct drive heat. Hey, I'll concentrate. I'll cool the air around me. You know what I mean? It's got a little solar panel wannels, you know, because like that's the surface, right? You know, I gotta cover it with something, right? Got shroudies, you know, right? You got handlebars, right? And behold, it's about the same weight as like, you know, previous early 2000s non-powered bicycles. And now it also happens to travel quite fast. Yeah, no, you don't need to pet it. Stand in the sun for a while. Sweat a little bit, right? And then whee, it'll just go. But you know, it's flat tracking it. That's not up a hill. So there's that. And then move on to yes, and then I added electric motors. Because why wouldn't I after a while? Right? It's like, well, this is going to independently pump, right? It's like, well, now I'll just be able to heat it up and pump it at the same time and compress it even harder. That's a linear accelerator, right? Except it's also rotating, so it linearly accelerates and rotates it at the same time, right? To effectively help it do its thing that it needs to do. Now it's also going to get hotter, which is good because that's a good thing. You're going to want that. Which now then means I have a frame. It's a little wider, you know. And sure, there are vacuum light, and yes, sure, there are the things that cool the solar panels, and yes, sure, there are the fucking things that are the piezoelectric and the radiators combined together all as one. Because it's actually fairly easy to manufacture that, which is a whole other thing for what it's worth. Because it's like, oh, I have a photovoltaic cell. I just need to like make some cooling on the other side. That's basically just a fucking heat sink, essentially. You can just intersect them with like a fucking tube that I already need there, and that's a vacuum thing, and then that's a heat exchange, and then that's its own version of like a Jules Thompson acoustic resonance, because like of course there's going to be vibrations, and then you have the ability to have the suspension and shocks, all of that to get absorbed into the bike and frame and make even more electricity and power for you, along with the lowest weight tires you could probably ever have. And now I have the ability to, even if I so chose, add in fuel. The frame can support something like this. Let me just get out my Jules Thompson acoustic resonance turbine from a center out approach that, of course, turns things. It's quite flat. And in so doing, it takes a little tiny amount of heat and it then expands it and does a lot of work energy. And then there's a lot of electron flow, otherwise known as redox flow, and charge difference. Um, Substances, a good way to put it is a fuel cell, right? And so, like, that allows for catalytic conversion and work energy from the electrons. And of course, as they're moving, faster they go, that gives you a greater amount of force imparted, which also because of the magnets. And then there's the other side of like, well, if it's, let's say, a changing of the electromagnetic field, because of course electricity is moving through cables, and then it changes its field type, and then there are this thing called coils there as it rotates, of course, and then there's and then there's and then there's also, so piezoelectric, catalytic, fuel cell, heat, air, we breathe, sucking in some air, filtering the air, oxygen, nitrogen, expansions, heat go to expansion, burning. It goes outwards and inwards. It's like a rotary and a radial together. And acoustically resonates. Of course, the exhaust has to go somewhere. Yes, the atmosphere. Pretty obvious, I felt. In line, is it? Right where your bike seat post is? Yes. And what is this? Is this water it burns? Some hydrogen and oxygen and a little storage of water in between. I can burn a lot less of that oxygen. What is that? Is that dirt? What you got over there? You got some hydrogen in the air? I would turn that into H2O2. I'm gonna burn so much shit up on this bad boy. Boom. You got carbon? It's a what you got over there? I'm a fucking definitely making an explosive decompression of nitrogen oxides. Get some carbon. I'm gonna form carbon graphite particles. As I separate them, they'll produce heat. Make expansionary things occur. You got dirt in the atmosphere? There's some thermodynamics over there, man. That's some heat I can use. Behold, my fuel is both water and air, and a little bit of starting electricity field juice, and some movement and whatnot, and then also some hydrogen and some oxygen. Ooh, we've never had this before. It burns very little fuel to get massive amounts of kilowatts, I'll tell you. Kilowatts? Yes, hundreds actually. I'm glad you asked. Come here, come here, come here. You see this thing? It's about to go about 250 miles an hour here. Then you will be pedaling. The faster it goes through the air, the more warm it gets, the better it becomes. The easier it is to be able to make more and more power. You still have to pedal, though, for it to run. So it's just a regular bike. And no, it does not have a 49cc engine. It actually technically only has about 13 cc's total. So there's that. It's really just really good at making that work for you. So there's that. And that's why it's a turbine. And a radial. And a rotary. It's also kind of like a flywheel because it's spinning and counter-rotatively. Anyways, you still have to pedal though, otherwise it doesn't work. And it doesn't do anything. So there's that. Oh, it's an engine. It's more of an electric motor. Because that's literally what it's doing. But, I digress. I need it to be with a belt. I have a belt of vacuum. Shut up about your stupid vacuum belt. No, I refuse to do that. By the way, remember the whole like it's in and out oscillates? Well, it's also rotating, right? Because like that's the bracket thing and all that. So that way it constantly is more able to impart more movement, right? And not to mention just out in, which increases its force. So that's a really good way to do it. Same thing for this. The quote unquote engine, otherwise known as an electric motor. It's burning fuel. I burn electrons to make fuse, which make more electrons, which then spin things faster, and then make more heats, which then make more expansions, which then make more captures of the energy. Which is it? Is it thermodynamic or is it an electric motor? It's a hybrid, obviously. Thank you. But we're gonna have to class it because it's mostly just using electromagnetic fields. So there's that. Yeah, that's them though, right? I know. Ugh. So, behold, that is a structural part of your bike seat post frame. You also have suspension in your bike seat post and gimbals and it goes up and down, and then you still have like the soft tail and the nice soft front end. Because if you're going to go 250 miles an hour, you're going to want that. And you also have floating, dual-sided disc brakes, front and rear, and big calipers that definitely can't lie. Non-puncturable tires, and yes, it's a tiny, skinny little frame that's going to do this. There ain't no big boy chunkers. It's, look at me, I'm on a regular pedal bike. You know what I mean? And I'm about to pedal my ass to 250 miles an hour. Getting to Bonneville Sulphats today! Whee! I have to get a run up. And then I mean, they get pushed by like vehicles, like trucks and so on, right? So, like, I'm allowed to do that. That's true, yeah. Whew, boy, it's still a lot of work. Oh, yeah, no, the gearing gets real rough, let me tell you. Even if I have to suck in all of that air and everything else, trying to reduce some of that, air resistance, right? Wind resistance, it's still a lot of effort to do that. And it's not easy to do it easily when the gearing effectively turns into, I might as well be pushing forces that make no sense. I mean, what do you got over there? That 500 pounds? Deadlift, bitch! Oh, yeah! No, but you can't just deadlift. You can't just push up. You know what this is because you have to pull it up again. You know what I mean? Like, you have to like bring it down. That's why the strap is there. You have to, you know what I mean? You had to pull it back down. Uh, what you got over there? No, it's not your legs. Yes, flip yourself upside down and stick them to your hands. What's that bar doing? Can you have a bar up there that you can handle with all that weight? God, you suck. Strongman competition time. I hook myself into this bar. I then deadlift reverse style. All of the 500 pounds. Holy shit. No. Also, I can ride my bike faster now. Because it's push and pull together. So you have to do both on either side. It's going to be a rough one, but you can get there. Right now, granted, the bigger engine's going to get you there a lot better. This is the smallest engine that it'll come with, and it'll still do it, but you are going to have to pedal a lot fucking harder. Yeah. No, because it starts changing. I didn't talk about this, but you have to change a different type of gear. So instead of it like being about like really small and you're trying to move it, you do need to increase your leverage, right? Because it's so hot that it now needs to expand further, and then it needs to combine that with the rotation of other air, right? And so it effectively is a way to get around some of the leveraged issues that are there, you know, and yes, it takes time to do that. And so now, in order to speed up the time, you have to pump faster and harder in a smaller compressed space. Instead of it, oh, I'm going to do it in a smaller area and then I'm going to, impart more force. This one turns into, yeah, no, you're going to pump just to make it go faster, right? So, because you're going to need that leverage at those, ridiculously high speeds. So, it's like, behold, it switched to you're going much faster than you thought, huh? No worries, though. It's going to be just fine. You got the brakes. You've got the ability to brake. You've got all the braking that you're ever going to need. And you have a decently wide contact patch. for your tires. It's just a solid like big boy 3 inch. You know, only 2 inch sidewall. Every time I think about it, it's like it's meant as a bike. You do know that, right? It's meant to be a bike. But no, 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 it's fine. I suppose if you wanna do it. Okay, let's go. The tires will be able to handle it, which is fine. You can be one of the because that's what it would be. It'd be like you're a big, strong woman or man, you're just able to pedal like just up to ridiculous speeds. It's like, no, I'm on the highway going 75. Officer, there's no laws against the bicycle going that fast. I, hey, it's 13 cc's. Eh, I can't. Eh, I don't need insurance. I don't need a helmet. Although you're probably gonna want a helmet and a suit and everything for this shit. You know what I mean? Yeah, should really do that. Yeah. Uh, oh man, it's scary though. Every time I think about it, yeah, because I can potentiate more and more that way. That's all I do is I just well, this is no. If I use this way, and then if right, well then I'll just use it like this, and then I'll get more from and then more, and then more, and then they're hit a point of an exponentiation of more. Like we're traveling faster and it's getting more and more and more. And more. Oh no, the very opposite of what people are going to tell me. There's a bunch of air resistance. Yeah, no, that's good. I want that. That's a lot more heat. And in fact, I'm going to suck it into my engine, which effectively is a motor, yes, but it'll go faster and faster and faster and pump faster and faster and faster. Everything's going to be really fast. Everything gets more and more potentiated until the point where it's like, yeah, no, there's a point of a zenith. Like, there's only really so much power you can get. And then that 250 miles an hour is really kind of like that max point, because in all ways you need bigger rims for it to work. You're going to need a bigger axle too if you want to go faster than that. That means more leverage, and that means faster speeds, and that means a lot more gearing ratio, effectively, right? And uh, then it's a lot more doable to go faster. Although 250 is still ridiculous. So you know, it's one of those things where it's like, no, 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 you're at the very point where, like, yeah, technically you can go a little faster, maybe downhill, there's less wind resistance, whatever, right? But like, it's really right there, roughly. A little lower, like 247, a little higher, 252. It's right there as the average. And that's ridiculous to a lot of people because, you know, that's a dangerous speed. So, but it's like, behold the issue that I have with cc's of displacement for any of the ideas of, um, laws and rules and regulations. It's like, it's a 49, you don't need this. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do 13 then, and I'll make it 250 miles an hour. Just give me a while. And behold, 250 miles an hour, and I made it. And it's pedalable, which means it's just a bike. You're on the highway that fast. You just see it on the highway, just over there. The fuck? No hands. Woo! Keep up with this. Eh! You're not gonna make it. No, I can make that. Yeah, I know, right? Uh, to me, is if I was a person so inclined, I would do it immediately. Because I am that inclined. Same thing for like strong men and women. It's like, oh yeah, I am that inclined. You know what I mean? Like, I am this level of built. I can cruise no problem at 75. no issues. Takes nothing, right? And you see like a little kid say, "Yeah, okay, my cadence is a little more, but I can do it too." You don't have as much wind resistance. That's not fair. You don't have nearly as much weight either. That's not fair. They did. Oh, they got a much bigger motor. They have a much bigger battery pack. Look at the size of that fuel tank. Look at this. It's like this is actually a big beefy guy. You know, like. "Ugh." Meanwhile, they're cruising with you, and they still have to pedal pretty fast. Yeah. Uh huh. Uh huh. That would help out our economy so much, the carbon economy and the carbon, like for oil and whatnot, because it's like it's mostly just hydrogen. I mean, they could do this already with like some solar panels and a little bit of like electrolysis, right? Like this is an HHO kind of thing, and store it a little bit with a little bit of compression, and then charge it up, right? Leave the bike outside, get maybe a bigger couple solar panels and a battery, and then drain it in, and that'll get you to and from work every day. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's the thing. It'd have a ridiculous range. Uh, Not at 250, although it's still going pretty fast. So but like miles an hour that is. So it still go pretty far. But at like 60 miles an hour. Let's say it wasn't super windy. It's still fairly sunny out. Maybe it's a little warm. Let's say it's spring, right? Springtime. Then we started. Let's say it was Phoenix, Arizona. You'd be able to get to LA and back, and still have like more than enough to go get groceries or something. But to be fair, for anyone that's out there, it's like, man, that sounds insane, right? It's like, well, it's not using only one, right? Yeah, and then it's going to use the dust and carbon dioxide that's in there, the pollution to actually even increase the amount of power it's going to get. And there's also the other side of it. It's like, yeah, but you're going to need to stop, pee, eat food, anything really, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it takes a long time to drive that far at 60 miles an hour, and it's like that's lower speed than what the kind of like actual speed is around there, because it's like 65 to a really winky it's around more like 85. There's like a lot of people actually do 85 around there. There's like not the 70, not the 75. It's more like 85. Now, of course, it's varying. It's like from 65, which is what the semi trucks are, and then there's all the way up to the 85 guys, right? And so uh, you can do that, and you could do it for a really long time. But like my whole shtick was, I'll just stay like roughly behind a semi truck. It's like I don't really have to worry that much. You're my blind spot as motherfucking hell, dude. Yeah, no, but you don't have to worry. Like for what it's worth, you're not gonna have to worry. You know what I mean? Like it's not that bad. Hell, I'll just grab a hold of it on the other side and just like, hey, thanks for towing me. Is what I would do. Just FYI, this is not what that scenario was for in terms of battery and actual, but it's like I would totally do that. Yeah, we could just be like, yeah, this guy's pulling me along. Can you fuck off? You can see me in the mirror. Uh, Get out of here, you dick. Damn it. Yeah. Meanwhile, the other side of it is like you could do a flow of traffic thing that fast, but it's also the other issue of like if you're doing 60, then of course you have a little bit left over. But it's like this is an averaging because it goes down to 55 and whatever the speed is, and then there's of course wherever you're running around, and so whatever street speed there is that you get, and so like this is an averaging of that, right? But I didn't say that. So let's say it was a genuine. I somehow managed to get to Las Vegas at 65 miles an hour all the way there, which would be difficult. So it's like real world is hard, right? Yeah. Uh, but from Phoenix to LA back to Phoenix, I would still have stuff left over, right? For what it's worth. Um, and that's not stopping or anything. Like you just powered through that, okay? Somehow. Jeez, right? Yeah. Um, because that's hours and hours of never-ending pedaling. So it's just you got some legs, you got some cardio. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you do that, then you also, for all intents and purposes, can still probably get you another 10 to maybe 15 miles, depending on how you're going to do it, at still 65 miles an hour. And so that would then turn into something entirely much more if you don't want to go that fast. It's like, oh, I want to go 15 miles an hour. I've got a trailer. I'm just going to do that. Get some groceries. Right. I wanted to go to the farther away grocery store. That's what that was. And then I powered faster back because I got ice cream. Ice. Did you at least put it in the bag? The insulated bag? Yeah. Okay. Maybe it won't melt. It's now melted. Hey. Yes. Woohoo. Meanwhile, you know what I did today? I rode my bike just all the way to LA, not Las Vegas, LA, and then back to Phoenix, Arizona. I just felt like doing that. God, it's like a whole day trip. It is literally, I started in the morning at like 5 fucking a.m. and I got back late in the night. 65 miles an hour. There are hills there, by the way. There's a lot of stuff in between those 2 points, which are mountains, not hills, but there are hills too. So that is not an easy like biking ride adventure for anyone, and I mean that hard. Uh, but it's doable with this pretty easily. I mean that's gearing change or whatever, and you're able to maintain that at that speed. It's just the elephant is that yeah, no, that's at 5 a.m. and then I probably get back at like 8 or maybe 10 p.m. You know, or maybe not. I mean, it's like Phoenix to for 65. You're gonna maintain. Um, no, because there are moments where you can't really. I mean, you're turning like hard as fuck up on those mountain passes. How are you maintaining a 65-mile-per-hour turn? Just dive into and just. I'm gonna move on. Um. mm, This one would probably closer to at least a 10 to 12 hour adventure, right? Um, but you can probably bring that down to 8. Like if it's just there and back and like you were really trying, you could probably do it. But again, it's one of those 10 to 12 hours. Like 10 is like you're already pushing, right? And then 12, it's like, yeah, no, I mean, it's mostly like 6 hours to get there, roughly ish, like 6 to 8, roughly, right? But it's like, yeah, but then you have to also pee, eat, take a break, that kind of thing. And so it really is like a full day adventure. And like, even then, it's going to be, oh, yeah, no, you have to really kind of push yourself. And most likely, you're probably going to hit those ridiculous speeds. Like, there's nothing around here. I'm going 120 miles an hour. Whee! You just see some traffic camera. There's some guy just pedaling his ass off. Just fucking flies through on the camera. Just like enters the screen. A couple of frames later, he's gone. There's no way to know. He covered up his face. There's no at all license on this thing, and it plates. What the fuck is this? Just gone immediately because they don't need it. It's a bike. It's a literal actual bike. It has turn signals or whatever, but it's a bike. Yeah, I don't think you'll need them because how freaking close in that you can get. These things can go right through things. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how fast you could really go with that. Right, but most of the time, motorcycles are really good at being like that because, like, you don't have to pedal, and so you're shifting your weight when you do that, which is one of the reasons why, like, my bike is almost always like a slight bit of a lean forward, and the pedals are not really like you're gonna sit up kind of thing and like have them directly over your knees. Think about it more like you're pushing down or you're leaning forward because of course that's aerodynamically like a good thing to do, so you have to have those kinds of handlebars and whatnot for that, right? And so like that means the bike pedals are further back, and that means that you get more leg extension towards the rear of where the rear bike tire is. Instead of it's in this frame point right here, you have to go push it back a little bit further. And that's also another reason why there's a belt to help this, and a bit of a saddle for the front to kind of hold where your gut is and everything, lean against and be a little bit more forgiving, I guess. It's also why you have the suit, right? It's like, hey, I got the air, and then I've got the sweat, and I've got like, I just cover it up a little bit with like this nice little. It's not really technically fabric, but it's a bendy solar panel more or less. Because why wouldn't I do that, right? And it's like I got the gas tank, and so like that's another version of I'll just capture air, right? It's like, yeah, it cools me as I ride. Yeah, leaning forward. This is annoying. Oh, okay, yeah, I know. You have to lean forward, then you have to push Oh wow, you have to really extend that leg all the way back there. Yeah, you sure do. You're gonna want to do that. There's giblets here, man. There's a cup. Deal with it. Stick it into the hole of the cup. It's widenable and so on. But do that. As for women, kind of similar thing. Right, yes. Anyways, extend those legs. You're going to want to. Meanwhile, it's also something you can just sit back and lean and do a recumbent if you wanted to, which I personally prefer that one myself. Like, there's the one that's that one, which is like uber ultra speed, hardcore. Oh, yeah. And then there's me who's like, I'm gonna recline and I'm just gonna do like, big boy steps effectively. He's just like, "Ugh, you know what I mean? Except a little, yeah, it's a lot easier. It's got a nice little windscreen protector there. And that's my nice aerodynamic stuff too. But it of course capture a little bit of that light as heat and electricity, right, and all that. So it's like, oh yeah, no, that's nice. That's good. I like this. This is yeah, big long monkey hanging handlebars instead of way up there though. It's way back here. That way I can lean back that far. Nice comfortable seating position. Because if you're gonna go for a long period of time, leaning forward is not as nice. Leaning backwards is a lot nicer. And then I can still sit up, which is nice, and I can still pedal as like a normal bike. But, you know, some people don't like that. But I personally prefer the recumbent, reclining kind of position myself. And yes, these do have the bike brakes, the regenerative braking, and regular braking, which is a good thing. You're going to want that, just in case it fails, right? So that's also with the regenerative braking because it's higher degree of from the center point, and so more leverage and torque, and more often it can do it. Uh, it's on the rim, right? Versus the disc brakes, which are just regular disc brake braking, right? So it's like I got regenerative braking for that, and that gives me more power back effectively, and more of an ability to stop it where you kind of need to, which is nice to have. Why did you give us the leaning forward one? Because this one's mine. This was I'm still selling that one, but you wanted this one fast as possible. You want all the fasty fasts. I don't really like the fasty fast. I'm fine with just even being right next to a fucking semi and just kind of like, yeah, I'm just gonna fucking ride with you. It's gonna connect this just smidge. It's not really connected. Like, no worries. It's basically just a magnet. It's gonna boom, and it's I have to power it to be able to do that. So like it's good, and it's pretty stiff. It's got a nice little like bending, and then shock thing, and you can see me. It's all good. I'm nowhere near where the other cars are off to your left. I'm off on the right. No worries, right? So I'll just kind of putt along. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is nice. And then turns into, oh yeah, no, I kind of want to get it going a little bit faster up the hill. I'll see you later, maybe, you know, and drop back a little bit and go over, go around. Whee! Nice. Thanks, guys. Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Why do they have two in there? Yeah, whatever. People have friends. It's cool. I don't. I just have myself on my lonely motorcycle, which is not a motorcycle. It's a bike. It's a pedal bike. And that's why you're seeing me pedal up a hill so fast. Yeah. Behold my pedal bike of extraordinary awesometude. Anyways, I want to move on from that one because it's like been going for too long. Yeah, an hour 46 minutes here so far, which is crazy. And then let's see here. Right, there is an option for having a second person on board, but that one's a whole other thing. Yeah, because it's like, no, I have to extend that frame, right? And we already have tandem bicycles, but it's like, right, and I need to have it so that way that the engine exists in between you. And so, like, the person got pushed quite a bit forward and you got pushed quite a bit further back. Yeah, right. Right. And it's like they're steering and you can add in your power. Sure, absolutely. But it is what it is. Because they have to be separate and they have to be geared for you. And so I have separate gearing and all that. And it's like, oh yeah, no, it's totally possible. Um, but like it's two-wheel drive, right? And so it has to balance everything. So this is a little more complicated. Yeah, and you need to learn how to lean with me. Can you learn how to lean with me? You need to learn how to do that. This is really annoying. You know that, right? You need to not keep trying to fucking steer this from the rear, you dick. We're going too fast for that. You know that, right? You can't do this like you do on your tandem bicycles. This is not funny. We will die. There's no doing any of that. But you only get the one person as a passenger, and then it's like, here's the sidecar, and then the other sidecar. That's you need to pedal for those sidecars. And then, by the way, I can put two people in that sidecar, each one of them. So I have six people total, all pedaling. These things can go really fast, by the way, because each one of them has their own battery and engine for the sidecars too, which they can't work without going into a bicycle. So there's that. But like they'll also tilt. So they'll tilt and then they're connected in such a way that like not just the bike can tilt, but the side pods can as well, the sidecars, right? And they're shaped so that way they get great suspension and all that stuff. And they can even turn inwards as well to help with turning radiuses. But it's all steered by one person. So if he tilts and turns, all that, you're all doing that. So you better fucking figure it out. Six people will have to work together. Which we already know how hard it is to get two people not to fuck around. So no, they actually have three wheels. So they have one in the rear, and then they have two at the front, right? And that way it allows for it to do that kind of turning and everything for the side pods. Um, just because it's easier. They have to be a little longer, right? It's a motorcycle, though. It's not. This is as standard. Here's a trailer that also comes with it. It's powered. The powered trailer could work under its own power. Has big battery banks. It unfolds and then it tensions itself. You have a crank and then there's a vacuum thing and all this other stuff. and it creates a big, cool, like kind of RV tent thing, right? And now you have 6 people that are all helping move this whole ginormous thing. You can get done with just one person, and you just don't get as far, and you have to take breaks for a little longer or let everything charge, right? But considering it's a huge battery in the freaking trailer, I feel like you can easily do that because it's usually like 2,000 miles of a range capacity, right? So it's like, no, here's 6, and then you have all of that, and it's like that's actual extra batteries too, for all of your camping glamping needs. Which, by the way, come on, kids, your family, you need to help pedal. We need to get up to the mountaintop to be able to set this up. There's a bunch of like divots, though, Dad. Nah, I don't care. We're going up this. We're mountain biking up this. It all fits within the same size of like a van or a truck, right? So like it's big wide, but it's not that big wide, you know. So you can get there, and because it has a bunch of articulating, front and rear and all that, and even with the trailer hitch and all that, it also has another 3-wheel thing too, which will split the rear into two, but like it's mostly just one, right? So it's like a dually, but the dually will split. So that's that. Anyways, that allows for a lot of movement over very rough terrain that most of the time people will never want to do. And it's like, eh, come on, kids, and all the friends and so on, we're going camping. Meanwhile, let's pedal. We're pedaling. We're pedaling. Getting up there like a goat. It's like nothing. Dude, dude, what the hell is this steep ass hill? It's fucking almost 70% in this bitch. Just going vertical practically. Right? And then otherwise, them. I think you should take a different route. Just over there, and then they'll come back. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's fair, though. Setup. What took you guys so long? Really? What took it? Fuck you. You know. That's why I love that. It's like that's what that's for. But it's all pedal bikes. That's right. It's just bikes. Just bikes. No insurance necessary. No license necessary. It does have turn lane indicators and all that, turn signals, right? Okay. It's got seatbelts and doesn't really have. I do have a little bit of airbag, just as best I can, because I mean they are bikes, but it's what you could do. And the suits, of course, help a lot. Yeah. So here's that. All right. It's like, no, I have to get a bike that can go fucking that fast. How? Oh, and I can just glamp now in the fucking woods. Yeah, oh yeah, I used a lot of the Stirling engine stuff, and then like the solar panel, right? And it has like a nice little vacuum airship thing that kind of sucks in the center and that forces outwards this, the little rods and tension. Big balloon thing effectively is the rigid airship, and it goes up and it expands as a result, right? And and then like that's got your solar panel, but also the internet, the Starlink stuff. So like you got it all connected if you want to. Yeah, have fun up there. Yeah, don't fucking get hit by lightning, please. Anyways, it's got a nice cable, it's the whole thing, and then this opens up a big solar panel, all that, right? And then, and of course, moving stuff, diaphragm thing, right? Wind, heat, you want to store heat, no, it's got a vacuum kind of thing. And it's like that's the rigid and the tension stuff. So it's like that allows for the Stirling and the cooling and or heating, depending on how you want to do it, right? And even pumping of water, which that's a different thing. It's one single, but then like there's a gap, and whole thing. Anyways, doesn't matter. Point is, it's kind of like it'll pump itself up because it's got tension up at the top, and then like that's a pump that's there, a little bit of pump right there, and then this is like a vacuum area in the center, and then that's just regular non-Newtonian water, right? And then at the bottom it's like, oh yeah, right, but it's like, right, except the bottom is actually what I want, and then the top is really going to be the wastewater, which will then get filtered because that'll go through a filtration process, and then whatever, right? It'll self clean itself. Yeah, they're technically separated, not just from like the little in between piece, because there's still stuff on the sides, right? Yeah, and so it's like, yeah, I don't want that. So like they need to be separated, so like there's a bladder on the inside for the wastewater that then like drains itself off, right? But that allows for a huge amount of wastewater to be collected, which is why it's able to fold out quite a bit and do a lot. Most of the water is all at the bottom, right? That's what's supported. Do you have the sewage treat? Oh yeah, no, I have the what's it called again? The one pot method. Yeah, the one pot method for my carbon economy fix playlist, which essentially turns fecal matter, waste, plastics you find, ground up plant material, so on, into hydrocarbons. Or just hydrogen and oxygen and a bunch of fertilizer and a bunch of filtered stuff for like batteries, like sodiums and carbon and whatnot. Yeah, like it gets rid of carcinogenic compounds, we'll say that. So we're always returning new nutrients to anywhere we camp. Or just more hydrocarbons if you want to run with hydrocarbons. You can do that. I just happen to use mostly hydrogen and oxygen with a little bit of water. So that just means it turns it into more fertilizer. Yeah, then we separate all the stuff that we would like that can either be batteries or uh, stuff for helping start a fire or stuff like that. So makes it really easy. I usually store like remember that vacuum like airship thing and it cinches it down. Well, there's a bunch of fan blades and that it's like a donut, right? It's a big long donut, right? Scoops in air on one side, whatever, tries to angle itself to the path of wind. So it produces electricity with the solar panel that's there, right? But also the wind that goes through, right? And it's like, well, that's nice, but I want a little bit more for, energy from my camping. I want to also be able to cook things, sure, but I also would like to make it have a little bit of electricity produced. So it's like that's kind of like a heat exchanger, right? Like and most of it goes into like this, but then it'll go off into the kind of it's effectively a heat exchanger. Yeah, it's literally like a radiator that's just got piezoelectrics and the acoustic resonance stuff that I talk about. And then then exchanges it to the air, and it's like right. Well, most of it's here. You're gonna be able to like fry something or something, right? Yeah, but it's like, but if I allow for that air to go back in, as it'll suck in more air, then that'll also take in fresh air, and then it'll draw in that air to effectively combust everything, and then exchange and all that, right? And so it's like, oh yeah, no, I got some electricity, right? Hey, right. It's nice. Yeah, but I have to, if I want it pure as a generator, I have to cover that, and that's a whole thing. So, but like otherwise, it's a nice, like it spreads itself out. So it's a generator, sure, but it's like that's a heat exchanger. So it's like that'll heat up from that campfire a whole area inside of your tent or outside or anything really that we want. Yeah. And that's fun for me personally because it then means it's a lot nicer right around. And I like that. I like that a lot more personally. But remember that crank? Bike crank. You know what I mean? I got a bike crank. It's basically the equivalent of a bike crank here. Potentiates it goes, you spread it open a little bit before, but if you don't need to, like you just crank it and then it do it all. But like if you do a little bit before, it goes a lot faster. So thinking about new bike cranks. And they're almost 2 hours in, so that means you're gonna get my tagline and all that. That's called whatever it is for when I leave in the video. Suck my dick and balls, like and subscribe, hit that notification for any new things, and share. Please and thank you. See ya!